Four Prilorian females stand frozen as the airlock door hisses open, revealing the human they've dreaded meeting. Their luminescent markings pulse with fear, eyes fixed on the muscular form of Brian Reed as he steps into the preparation chamber. Xena, Zara, Lyra, and Vex huddle together aboard the starship Nebula Voyager, their tall, blue-skinned bodies trembling. Selected for an interspecies mating program with humans, they've spent the journey to Earth consumed by terror. Humans, with their sharp teeth and history of warfare, have long been viewed as dangerous carnivores by the peaceful Prilorians. The ship's AI announces Brian's arrival, its emotionless voice echoing through the chamber. Human participant Brian Reed, age 28, former military officer, current diplomat, has entered the preparation area. Through the one-way window, the Prilorians observe Brian's every move. His intense gaze sweeps the room, unaware of their scrutiny. Lyra gasps as Brian reaches into his pocket, retrieving a protein bar. He tears into the wrapper with his teeth, and the Prilorians recoil. "By the stars, he's eating raw meat," Vex whispers, her voice quivering. Dr. Alara, the ship's medical officer, approaches the group. The neutral alien's calm demeanor does little to soothe the Prilorians' nerves. "It's time for your physical examinations," she states, gesturing towards the medical bay. As they follow Dr. Alara, the Prilorians exchange worried glances. The doctor begins explaining human anatomy, attempting to dispel their misconceptions. "Humans are omnivores, not carnivores," she clarifies. "They consume both plant and animal matter for sustenance." The Prilorians listen skeptically, their fear deeply ingrained. Zara speaks up, her voice barely audible. "But what about their aggressive nature? Their taste for alien flesh?" Dr. Alara sighs, realizing the extent of their misinformation. She continues her explanation, detailing human physiology while conducting the examinations. Despite her efforts, anxiety still radiates from the Prilorians. Meanwhile, in an adjacent room, Brian receives a briefing on Prilorian culture. A holographic display shows images of their bioluminescent markings and tall, lithe forms. The briefing officer emphasizes the importance of this mating program for future human-Prilorian relations. "Remember, Mr. Reed," the officer states firmly, "these Prilorians have serious misconceptions about humans. You must be gentle and non-threatening at all times." Brian nods, his jaw set with determination. He understands the weight of his role in this diplomatic mission. As he mentally prepares for the encounter, tension builds on both sides of the airlock. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Alara provides the Prilorians with translation devices and protective gear. The sight of the gear only amplifies their fears about human danger. Xena clutches her translator, knuckles pale against her blue skin. "Is this really necessary?" she asks, voice trembling. Dr. Alara attempts to reassure them, but her words fall on deaf ears. The Prilorians' hearts race as they hear the airlock mechanism engaging. They prepare themselves for what they believe will be a terrifying encounter with a carnivorous beast. As the door begins to slide open, Brian takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the diplomatic challenge ahead. The Prilorians huddle together, their bioluminescent markings flickering wildly in response to their fear. The moment of truth arrives as the airlock fully opens, bringing the two species face-to-face for the first time. The moment of truth arrives as the airlock fully opens, bringing the two species face-to-face for the first time. Brian Reed steps into the room, his movements slow and deliberate. The four Prilorian females instinctively back away, their luminescent markings pulsing rapidly in fear. Xena, the tallest of the group, positions herself protectively in front of her companions. Her azure skin glistens with a thin sheen of sweat, betraying her anxiety. Brian, acutely aware of their fear, maintains a non-threatening posture as he takes in the sight of the alien females. "Hello," Brian says softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The translation device provided by Dr. Alara converts his words into the melodic tones of the Prilorian language. "I'm Brian Reed. I'm here as a friend." The Prilorians observe Brian's every move, their large iridescent eyes widening as they note the absence of visible fangs or claws. Xena's markings flicker uncertainly as she processes this unexpected development. Brian, drawing on his diplomatic training, decides to initiate a cultural exchange. He takes a small step forward, extending his hand towards Xena. In my culture, we greet each other like this. It's called a handshake. Xena hesitates, her gaze darting between Brian's face and his outstretched hand. After a moment of tense silence, she cautiously reaches out. As their hands touch, Xena's bioluminescent markings flare brightly, casting a soft blue glow across the room. The other Prilorians watch in fascination as Xena's fear visibly diminishes. Encouraged by this development, Zara steps forward next. Her markings pulse with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as she allows Brian to shake her hand as well. The warmth of his skin surprises her, and she finds herself studying the strange texture of his palm. In an adjacent room, Dr. Alara monitors the situation through a series of holographic displays. She observes the Prilorians' vital signs through their protective gear, noting with satisfaction the gradual decrease in their stress levels. Lyra, her scientific curiosity piqued, breaks the silence. "Your teeth," she says, her voice tinged with both fear and fascination. "They're not as sharp as we were led to believe. And your diet, is it true you don't solely consume flesh?" Brian smiles gently, careful not to show too many teeth. "That's correct," he explains patiently. "Humans are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. In fact, many of us choose to eat only plants." As Brian continues to answer Lyra's questions, dispelling myths about human biology and culture, Vex, the youngest of the Prilorians, inches closer. Her gaze is fixed on Brian's head, particularly his hair, a feature entirely absent in Prilorian physiology. Noticing Vex's interest, Brian slowly lowers his head. "Would you like to touch it?" he offers. Vex's markings pulse with excitement as she reaches out, her slender blue fingers gently brushing against Brian's hair. A soft, melodious sound of surprise and delight escapes her lips. "It's so different," she murmurs, her fear seemingly forgotten in the wake of this new discovery. As the initial tension in the room dissipates, the ship's AI announces, "It is now time for the shared meal portion of the cultural exchange program. Please proceed to the designated dining area." Brian gestures towards the door. "Shall we?" he asks, allowing the Prilorians to lead the way. The group moves to a specially prepared dining area, where an array of dishes from both human and Prilorian cuisines are laid out. The Prilorians' markings pulse with a mix of curiosity and lingering apprehension as they take in the unfamiliar sights and smells. Brian takes a seat at the table, careful to move slowly and telegraph his actions. He begins explaining each human dish, emphasizing the variety of plant-based options. "This is a salad made from leafy greens and vegetables," he says, indicating a colorful bowl. "And here we have a fruit platter. All of these come from plants." The Prilorians watch intently as Brian demonstrates the use of utensils, a concept foreign to their own eating customs. Xena, emboldened by their earlier interaction, attempts to mimic Brian's use of a fork. The utensil feels awkward in her hand, and her first attempt to spear a piece of fruit sends it skittering across the plate. Brian chuckles softly, the sound causing the Prilorians' markings to pulse in surprise. "It takes some practice," he assures Xena. "Why don't you show me how you would eat this?" Xena nods, her markings glowing with a softer, more relaxed pattern. She demonstrates the Prilorian method of eating, using her long, dexterous fingers to delicately pluck a piece of fruit from the plate. Brian watches carefully before attempting to mimic her actions, his clumsiness eliciting amused trills from the Prilorians. As the meal progresses, the atmosphere in the room lightens. The Prilorians begin to ask more questions about human culture, their earlier fear giving way to genuine curiosity. Brian, in turn, inquires about Prilorian customs, fostering a sense of mutual exchange. Just as Brian is explaining the concept of dessert to a fascinated Lyra, Dr. Alara enters the room. The Prilorians' markings pulse briefly in surprise, but they quickly settle back into a calm glow. "I hope the meal has been enlightening for all," Dr. Alara says, her neutral features betraying no emotion. "We will now proceed to the next phase of the program, a series of structured interactions designed to promote mutual understanding and potential compatibility." The Prilorians exchange glances, their markings flickering with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. We'll begin with individual sessions, Dr. Alara continues. Xena, you'll remain here with Brian. The rest of you will come with me for debriefing and preparation. As Zara, Lyra, and Vex file out of the room, Xena's markings pulse rapidly, betraying her sudden anxiety at being left alone with Brian. Brian, sensing her unease, maintains a respectful distance. Perhaps we could start with a tour of the human quarters, he suggests gently. It might help you understand our culture better. Xena nods, her markings gradually steadying as they fall into step beside each other. As they walk, she finds herself studying Brian's physique more openly, her earlier revulsion transforming into curiosity and a hint of something else, a feeling she's not quite ready to name. They approach Brian's personal cabin, the door sliding open with a soft hiss. Xena's heart rate increases, her markings pulsing with a new, unfamiliar rhythm. Brian feels a mix of diplomatic responsibility and growing personal interest as he gestures for Xena to enter, wondering what this next phase of their interaction will bring. As the door slides open, Xena hesitates for a moment, her luminescent markings pulsing rapidly. Brian gestures for her to enter, maintaining a respectful distance. Please, come in, he says softly, his voice calm and reassuring. I'd like to show you a bit of human culture, if that's all right with you. Xena nods, her tall, lithe form gliding into the room. Her large iridescent eyes dart around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Brian's quarters are modest but filled with items that pique her curiosity. Brian moves slowly, telegraphing his actions as he reaches for a sleek tablet on his desk. This is one of our digital devices, he explains, activating the screen. We use it for communication, information, and entertainment. Xena's markings pulse with interest as Brian demonstrates the tablet's functions. Her slender fingers hover near the screen, not quite touching. May I? She asks, her melodic voice tinged with both apprehension and curiosity. Of course, Brian replies, gently handing her the device. As Xena explores the tablet, Brian activates a small speaker. Soft, orchestral music fills the room, causing Xena's markings to flare in surprise. This is Earth music, Brian explains. A symphony, to be precise. Xena's head tilts slightly, her elongated ears twitching as she listens. It's complex, she murmurs. Beautiful in its way. Encouraged by her response, Brian pulls up images on a wall-mounted screen. These are some sights from Earth, he says, flicking through pictures of bustling cities, serene forests, and majestic mountains. Xena's fear seems to ebb as she absorbs these glimpses of human culture. Her posture relaxes slightly, and she moves closer to Brian to get a better view of the images. Your world is diverse, she comments, her voice filled with wonder. So different from ours. As they continue to explore human artifacts, Xena's questions become more personal. Your body, she begins, her markings pulsing with a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. How does it function in terms of reproduction? Brian feels a flush of heat in his cheeks, but maintains his composure. Well, he starts, choosing his words carefully, humans have a binary sex system. Males and females have different reproductive organs that complement each other. He goes on to explain human anatomy and reproduction in clinical terms, always maintaining a respectful and professional tone. Xena listens intently, her earlier fears about humans as dangerous carnivores fading with each new piece of information. As Brian reaches to change the image on the screen, Xena shifts her weight, accidentally brushing against his arm. The contact sends an unexpected jolt through both of them. Xena's markings flare brightly, pulsing with a rapid, intense pattern. Brian notices the change immediately. Are you all right? He asks, concerned. Your markings, they've changed. Xena's hand moves to her arm where they touched, her fingers tracing the glowing patterns. Yes, our bioluminescence is tied to our emotions and physical state. This is a response to stimuli. Intrigued, Brian asks, can you tell me more about that? How does your bioluminescence work in social situations? Xena's markings pulse softly as she explains. They serve many purposes: communication, emotional expression, and mating signals. Her voice drops slightly on the last words, her gaze meeting Brian's. The air between them seems to thicken with unspoken tension. Brian finds himself fascinated by the play of light across Xena's blue skin, while Xena's eyes trace the unfamiliar contours of Brian's face. In Prilorian culture, Xena says, her voice barely above a whisper, we have a greeting for those we feel connected to. She takes a small step closer to Brian. May I show you? Brian nods, his heart rate quickening. Xena leans in, gently pressing her forehead against his. The contact sends a wave of warmth through both of them, Xena's markings glowing with an intense pulsing light. The moment is broken by Dr. Alara's voice over the intercom. Xena, your session time has concluded. Please return to the common area. Zara, please proceed to Brian's quarters for your individual session. Xena pulls away, her markings still glowing brightly. Thank you, Brian, she says, her voice filled with newfound warmth. This has been enlightening. As Xena leaves, Brian takes a deep breath, centering himself for the next interaction. The door slides open again, revealing Zara. Unlike Xena's newfound ease, Zara's posture is rigid, her markings pulsing with apprehension. Brian, drawing from his experience with Xena, opts for a different approach. Hello, Zara. He greets her warmly. I thought we might start with a game from Earth. Would you like to learn? Zara's markings flicker with curiosity, momentarily overriding her suspicion. A game? She asks, her voice cautious but interested. Brian nods, retrieving a small box from a shelf. It's called chess, he explains, setting up the board. It's a game of strategy and foresight. As Brian teaches Zara the rules, her initial reservations begin to fade. She leans forward, her long fingers hovering over the pieces as she contemplates her moves. The game provides a neutral ground for interaction, allowing Zara to observe Brian without feeling threatened. After a few rounds, Zara's posture has noticeably relaxed. Her markings pulse with a steady, calm rhythm. This game, she says, moving her knight, it requires one to think like their opponent, to understand them. Brian nods, pleased by her insight. That's very true. Understanding others is key to many aspects of human interaction. Encouraged by the rapport they've built, Zara begins to ask more direct questions. What of human relationships? She inquires, her markings pulsing with curiosity. How do your kind choose mates? Brian explains the concept of dating and courtship, careful to present the information objectively. Zara listens intently, her earlier suspicion replaced by genuine interest. This dating, Zara says, her markings flickering thoughtfully, it sounds intriguing. Could you show me what it's like? Brian considers for a moment, then nods. We could simulate a casual dinner date, he suggests. It's a common way for humans to get to know each other better. Using the food synthesizer in his quarters, Brian prepares a simple meal for them to share. As they eat, he explains various human customs related to dating and romance. Zara watches Brian closely as he speaks, her gaze lingering on his arms as he gestures. Your physical form, she says, her voice tinged with a new note of admiration. It's quite impressive. May I, She reaches out hesitantly. Brian nods, extending his arm. Zara's cool fingers trace the contours of his bicep, her touch sending a shiver through him. Her markings pulse with a rapid, intense pattern, betraying her growing attraction. Before the moment can develop further, Dr. Alara's voice sounds again. Zara, your session has concluded. Please return to the common area. Lyra, you may now proceed to Brian's quarters. Zara withdraws her hand, her markings glowing brightly. Thank you, Brian, she says, her voice warm. This has been most educational. As Zara leaves, Brian takes a moment to compose himself. The door slides open once more, revealing Lyra. Her arms are full of data pads, her markings pulsing with barely suppressed excitement. Hello, Brian, Lyra says, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. I have so many questions about human biology and culture. Shall we begin? Brian smiles, preparing himself for what promises to be an intellectually stimulating session. As Lyra starts rattling off her first question, He realizes that each interaction brings new challenges and opportunities for understanding between their species. Species. As Lyra settles into a chair, her eyes alight with scientific curiosity, Brian can't help but feel a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "I hope you don't mind if I take some readings," Lyra says, activating her datapad. "I'm particularly interested in human physiology." Brian nods, intrigued by her methodical approach. "Not at all. What would you like to know?" Lyra's markings pulse with excitement as she begins her inquiry. She scans Brian's body with her device, recording his heart rate, body temperature, and other vital signs. "Fascinating," she murmurs, her eyes darting between Brian and the datapad. "Your body temperature is higher than ours, and your heart rate, it's so rapid." As Lyra continues her examination, Brian patiently explains various aspects of human biology. He describes the function of different organs, the human immune system, and the basics of human genetics. Lyra listens intently, her markings pulsing with each new piece of information. "Your willingness to share this knowledge is admirable," Lyra says, her voice warm with appreciation. "May I test some of your physical capabilities? I'm curious about human strength and reflexes." Brian agrees, and they move to a clear area of the room. Lyra sets up a series of simple tests, measuring Brian's reaction time, grip strength, and flexibility. As he performs each task, Lyra's clinical detachment begins to waver. She finds herself increasingly impressed by Brian's physical attributes, her gaze lingering on his form. Suddenly, Lyra's datapad emits a sharp beep and the screen goes dark. "Oh no!" she exclaims, her markings pulsing with distress. "It's malfunctioned." Brian leans in to examine the device. "May I?" he asks, holding out his hand. Lyra hesitates for a moment before handing it over. As Brian works on the datapad, Lyra watches his hands move deftly over the device. She's struck by his technical skill, a new dimension of human capability she hadn't considered before. Their heads are close together as they focus on the repair, and Lyra becomes acutely aware of Brian's proximity. His scent, unfamiliar yet not unpleasant, fills her senses. "There," Brian says triumphantly as the screen flickers back to life. "It should work now." Their fingers brush as he returns the datapad, sending an unexpected shiver through Lyra's body. Her markings flare brightly at the contact. "Thank you," Lyra says, her voice slightly breathless. She pauses, then adds, "There's one more test I'd like to conduct if you're willing. It's about human pheromones." Brian raises an eyebrow but nods. "What do you need me to do?" "Well," Lyra begins, her markings pulsing with a mix of scientific interest and something more personal. "Prilorians release specific scents to attract potential mates. I'm curious if humans have something similar. For a more accurate reading, would you mind removing your shirt?" Brian hesitates for a moment, then slowly removes his shirt. Lyra's eyes widen at the sight of his muscular torso, her scientific objectivity faltering. She approaches him, datapad in hand, ostensibly to take readings. But as she draws closer, she finds herself captivated by his scent and the warmth radiating from his skin. In a moment of impulse, Lyra sets aside her datapad. She reaches out, running her fingers along Brian's arm in a gesture that, among Prilorians, signifies romantic interest. Her body emits a subtle, attractive glow. Brian, surprised but intrigued, gently cups Lyra's face in response. Her markings flare brightly at his touch, pulsing with an intensity she's never experienced before. Just as the moment threatens to deepen, Dr. Alara's voice breaks through the intercom. "Lyra, your session has concluded. Please return to the common area." Lyra steps back, her markings still glowing brightly. Thank you, Brian," she says, her voice a mix of regret and newfound excitement. "This has been most illuminating." As Lyra leaves, Brian takes a deep breath, trying to center himself. The door slides open again, revealing Vex, the youngest of the Prilorians. Her eyes sparkle with curiosity and a hint of mischief. "Hello, Brian," Vex says, bouncing slightly on her toes. "I've heard so much about human culture. Can you teach me something unique to your species?" Brian, seeing an opportunity to build trust, smiles. "How about a dance? It's a common form of expression in human culture." Vex's markings pulse with excitement. A dance? Yes, please. Brian approaches Vex, explaining the concept of a slow dance. He gently places one hand on her waist and takes her hand with the other. As he guides her through the steps, Vex's initial excitement gives way to a more complex emotion. Her markings pulse rapidly, reflecting her heightened state. As they move together, Vex becomes acutely aware of Brian's proximity. The feeling of his hand on her waist, the warmth of his body so close to hers, sends unfamiliar sensations coursing through her. She finds herself both nervous and exhilarated by this new form of physical contact. Distracted by these new feelings, Vex missteps and accidentally treads on Brian's foot. "Oh!" she exclaims, immediately dropping to her knees to examine his foot. "I'm so sorry. Are you hurt?" As Vex kneels, she suddenly finds herself at eye level with Brian's lower body. Her gaze travels upward, taking in his physique from this new angle. Her eyes widen as she realizes that human anatomy is far different from what she had imagined, and far from the monstrous form she had feared. Vex stands slowly, her eyes never leaving Brian's form. Her earlier preconceptions about human physiology shatter, replaced by a new understanding and an unexpected attraction. "I'm fine," Brian assures her, unaware of Vex's internal revelation. "Shall we continue?" Vex nods, but as they resume dancing, her focus has shifted. She begins to ask more personal questions about human intimacy and relationships, her earlier fear replaced by genuine interest and growing desire. "How do humans express affection?" she asks, her voice low and curious. "Is it always through dance?" Before Brian can answer, Dr. Alara's voice interrupts once again. "The individual sessions have concluded. All participants, please reconvene in the common area for a group discussion." As they prepare to leave, Vex's gaze lingers on Brian, seeing him in a new light. The atmosphere between them has shifted, charged with newfound attraction and curiosity. Brian takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the group discussion to come. As he follows Vex out of the room, he can't help but wonder how these individual encounters will shape the group dynamic. The air seems to crackle with potential, setting the stage for more intimate interactions to come. As Brian followed Vex out of the room, the air seemed to crackle with potential. The individual sessions had revealed unexpected depths of connection between human and Prilorian, setting the stage for more intimate interactions to come. In the common area, Brian found himself surrounded by the 4 Prilorian females, Xena, Zara, Lyra, and Vex. Their markings pulsed with a mixture of curiosity and newfound attraction as they settled into comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Dr. Alara stood at the edge of the group, data pad in hand, ready to moderate the discussion. "Now that you've all had individual time with Brian," Dr. Alara began, "let's discuss your experiences and observations." Xena spoke first, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that hadn't been there before. "I found the humans' physical capabilities impressive. Their strength and agility are quite remarkable." Zara nodded in agreement. "And their capacity for strategic thinking is fascinating. The game of chess revealed much about human cognition." Lyra's markings flared briefly as she added, "Their physiology is unlike anything I've studied before. The complexity of human biology is truly astounding." Vex, the youngest of the group, bounced slightly in her seat. "And their forms of expression. The dance Brian taught me was so intimate." As the Prilorians shared their experiences, Brian noticed a marked change in their demeanor. The fear and suspicion that had initially colored their interactions had largely dissipated, replaced by genuine curiosity and, in some cases, unmistakable attraction. Before the discussion could delve deeper, the ship's AI interrupted with an urgent announcement. "Attention all crew members. Anomalous energy signals detected from a nearby uninhabited planet. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately." Captain Thorne, the human commander of the Nebula Voyager, strode into the common area moments later. His presence commanded attention, and even the Prilorians straightened instinctively. "We've been ordered to investigate the energy signals," Captain Thorne announced, his eyes scanning the assembled group. "This presents an opportunity to test our newly formed human-Prilorian cooperation. Brian, you'll lead the expedition. Xena and Lyra, You'll accompany him as representatives of the Prilorian species. Brian nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Xena's markings pulsed with a similar energy, while Lyra's eyes widened with scientific curiosity. You have 1 hour to prepare, Captain Thorne continued. Familiarize yourselves with the exploration equipment, including the environmental suits designed for Prilorian physiology. Dismissed. As the group dispersed, Brian led Xena and Lyra to the equipment bay. He helped them into the specially designed environmental suits, explaining the various functions and safety features. This suit will protect you from any potentially harmful atmospheres, Brian explained as he assisted Xena with her helmet. Their faces were inches apart as he checked the seal, and he couldn't help but notice the intensity of her gaze. Lyra watched the interaction with keen interest, her markings pulsing rapidly. When it was her turn, she stepped closer to Brian than strictly necessary, her fingers brushing against his as she adjusted her suit. The close proximity required to assist each other with the equipment led to several intimate moments. Brian found himself hyper-aware of every touch, every shared breath. The growing attraction between them seemed to intensify in the confined space of the equipment bay. As they made final preparations, 2 human crew members joined them. The landing party boarded the shuttle, an air of anticipation filling the small craft as it descended towards the planet's surface. Upon landing, they were greeted by a landscape that defied expectation. Vibrant flora in impossible shades stretched as far as the eye could see. Xena and Lyra's markings pulsed with excitement as they took in the alien world. Readings indicate the energy source is coming from those structures, one of the human crew members said, pointing to a series of ancient ruins in the distance. As they approached the ruins, Brian noticed Xena lagging slightly behind. He slowed his pace to walk beside her, their shoulders nearly touching in their bulky suits. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Xena nodded, her markings pulsing softly. "It's just overwhelming. I never imagined I'd be exploring an alien world alongside a human." Before Brian could respond, a loud crack echoed through the air. A section of the ruins above them began to crumble. Without thinking, Brian lunged forward, wrapping his arms around Xena and pulling her to safety as debris rained down around them. They landed in a tangle of limbs, Brian's body shielding Xena from the falling stones. As the dust settled, they found themselves face to face, their helmets nearly touching. Xena's markings flared brightly, pulsing in sync with Brian's rapid heartbeat. Lyra, who had witnessed the incident, felt a complex surge of emotions. Relief at her companion's safety warred with an unexpected twinge of jealousy. Her scientific curiosity about human Prilorian compatibility was now unmistakably tinged with personal desire. As Brian helped Xena to her feet, their hands lingered together longer than necessary. The moment was broken by one of the human crew members, calling out, "We've found something, some kind of device emitting the energy signature." The team gathered around the ancient alien artifact, its surface covered in indecipherable symbols. As they studied it, the device suddenly activated, bathing them in a soft, pulsating light. "What's happening?" Xena asked, her voice tinged with alarm. Before anyone could answer, Brian noticed a change in his environmental suit's readouts. "The device is affecting our suits somehow," he said, frowning at the display. "It's altering the atmospheric composition inside." Lyra's scientific instincts kicked in. "I'm detecting increased pheromone production in both human and Prilorian biology," she reported, her voice catching slightly as she spoke. The effect was immediate and potent. Brian found himself acutely aware of Xena and Lyra's presence, their sense seeming to bypass his suit's filtration system. The Prilorians' markings began to pulse more rapidly, their patterns shifting in mesmerizing ways. We should head back to the shuttle," one of the human crew members suggested, their voice strained. "Run some diagnostics on the suits." As they made their way back, Brian, Xena, and Lyra found themselves lagging behind the others. Their movements became languid, almost sensual, as they navigated the alien terrain. Xena and Lyra's bioluminescent patterns began to synchronize with Brian's heartbeat, creating a hypnotic display that drew their gazes. Upon reaching the shuttle, they discovered that the alien energy had affected its systems, temporarily grounding them. Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comm system, ordering them to set up a base camp and continue their investigation while the ship's engineers worked on a solution. As the alien sun began to set, casting the landscape in ethereal hues, Brian, Xena, and Lyra found themselves sharing a habitat dome. The close quarters amplified the effects of their enhanced pheromones, filling the air with an almost palpable tension. Brian's eyes met Xena's, then Lyra's, each gaze lingering longer than usual. The Prilorians' markings pulsed with an intensity he had never seen before, their bodies seeming to glow in the dimming light. As night fell on the alien world, the three of them lay in their respective sleeping areas, acutely aware of each other's presence. Their bodies hummed with desire, the effects of the alien device showing no signs of wearing off. They faced the prospect of a long night together on this mysterious planet, the air thick with unspoken tension and the promise of something more. More. The air crackled with an almost tangible electricity, their heightened senses making every breath, every subtle movement, feel magnified. Brian shifted in his sleeping bag, acutely aware of Xena and Lyra's presence. He could hear their quickened breathing, see the soft glow of their markings pulsing in the darkness. The effects of the alien device showed no signs of abating. If anything, they seemed to be intensifying. Unable to resist any longer, Brian reached out, his fingers gently brushing against Xena's arm. Her markings flared at his touch, a kaleidoscope of colors rippling across her skin. Xena's eyes flew open, meeting Brian's gaze with a mixture of surprise and unmistakable desire. Lyra, awakened by the sudden burst of light from Xena's markings, propped herself up on one elbow. Her scientific curiosity warred with the growing arousal coursing through her body. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice husky. Brian's hand moved to Xena's face, tracing the contours of her cheekbones. "I'm not sure," he murmured, "but I don't want to stop." Xena leaned into his touch, her markings pulsing in sync with her racing heart. She reached out, pulling Brian closer. Their lips met in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened, igniting a fire that spread through their bodies. Lyra watched, transfixed, as Brian and Xena's passion unfolded before her. Her own markings began to pulse rapidly, her body responding to the charged atmosphere. Unable to remain a mere observer, she moved closer, her hand coming to rest on Brian's shoulder. Brian broke away from Xena, turning to meet Lyra's gaze. Without a word, he drew her into their embrace, the three bodies intertwined, hands exploring unfamiliar terrain, discovering the unique interplay between human and Prilorian physiology. As their intimacy deepened, a sudden surge of energy from the alien device outside enveloped the habitat dome. A shimmering field materialized around them, intensifying every sensation. Brian gasped as he felt not only his own pleasure, but also the cascading waves of ecstasy coursing through Xena and Lyra. "I can feel everything," Xena breathed, her markings blazing with color. Lyra's eyes widened in wonder. "It's created a telepathic link between us," she realized, her scientific mind momentarily piercing through the haze of desire. The trio's exploration took on new dimensions as they shared not just physical intimacy, but a profound emotional connection. Every caress, every kiss, every gentle bite was experienced threefold, creating a feedback loop of pleasure that threatened to overwhelm them. Outside the habitat dome, the planet itself seemed to respond to their union. The ground trembled slightly, ancient machinery humming to life in the nearby ruins. Hidden chambers creaked open, releasing long-dormant energies into the atmosphere. In the nearby camp, the human crew members stirred uneasily in their sleep, subconsciously aware of the changes occurring around them. One of them, a young technician named Alex, woke with a start. He fumbled for his handheld scanner, frowning at the readings it displayed. "Captain Thorne," Alex called over the comm system, his voice tense. "Something's happening down here. The energy readings from the ruins are off the charts." Aboard the Nebula Voyager, Captain Thorne received the message with growing concern. He strode onto the bridge, barking orders to the night shift crew. "Full sensor sweep of the planet's surface. I want to know exactly what's going on down there." As the ship's sensors probed the alien world below, they detected the increased activity centered around the habitat dome. The energy field surrounding it interfered with their scans, creating a blind spot in their data. "Sir," the sensor officer reported, "we can't get a clear reading on the landing party's life signs. The energy interference is too strong." Captain Thorne's eyebrows furrowed. "Prepare for emergency extraction. We're bringing them home." But as the ship's transporters powered up, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. The alien energy field not only blocked their sensors, but also disrupted the transporter beam. Repeated attempts to lock onto the landing party failed. "Damn it," Thorne muttered. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me Zara and Vex. We may need their Prilorian insights on this." In their quarters, Zara and Vex were already awake, their bodies humming with a strange energy. They could sense the intense emotions emanating from their fellow Prilorians on the planet's surface. When Captain Thorne's summons came, they were already halfway to the bridge. "Captain," Zara said as they entered, her markings pulsing rapidly, "something is happening to Xena and Lyra. We can feel it." Vex nodded, her young face creased with worry. "It's like they're connected to something powerful, something ancient." Captain Thorne listened intently, his mind racing through possible scenarios. "We need to get them out of there," he said finally. "But our transporters are useless against whatever's affecting the planet." Zara and Vex exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. "We want to join the rescue mission," Vex declared, her voice firm despite her youth. "Absolutely not," Thorne began, but Zara cut him off. "With all due respect, Captain, we may be your only chance of understanding what's happening down there. Our connection to Xena and Lyra could be crucial." Thorne hesitated, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but you'll be part of a fully equipped team and you'll follow orders to the letter. Understood?" As preparations for the rescue mission began, dawn broke on the alien world below. In the habitat dome, Brian, Xena, and Lyra stirred from their passionate trance. They disentangled themselves slowly, their bodies still thrumming with residual energy. What happened?" Brian asked, his voice hoarse. Before either Prilorian could answer, a gasp from outside the dome caught their attention. They turned to see one of the human crew members staring at them through the transparent wall, his face a mask of shock. It was then that they realized the extent of their situation. The habitat dome was surrounded by a forest of crystalline structures that definitely hadn't been there the night before. These structures pulsed with the same energy that had affected their encounter, creating a mesmerizing light show in the early morning light. As the trio hurriedly dressed, struggling to process the changes around them and within them, they could hear the rest of the landing party approaching. The human crew members' voices were filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation as they took in the transformed landscape. Brian, Xena, and Lyra emerged from the habitat dome, blinking in the bright sunlight. They found themselves face to face with their bewildered teammates, the air thick with unasked questions. "What happened here?" Alex, the technician, demanded, his scanner whirring as it attempted to make sense of the crystalline forest. Brian opened his mouth to respond, but found he had no words to explain their experience. He looked to Xena and Lyra for help, feeling the lingering connection between them. As their eyes met, they realized that their intimate encounter had not only transformed the landscape, but had also irrevocably changed them. Before they could formulate a response, a distant rumble caught everyone's attention. They turned to see a shuttle entering the planet's atmosphere, its hull gleaming in the alien sunlight. As it descended, the crystalline structures around them began to pulse more intensely, reacting to the new arrival. Suddenly, a powerful energy pulse erupted from the crystal forest, engulfing the descending shuttle. The craft's lights flickered, its engines sputtering as it plummeted towards the ground. The landing party watched in horror as the shuttle disappeared behind a ridge, the sound of its impact echoing across the transformed landscape. "We have to help them," Brian said, already moving towards the crash site. Xena and Lyra fell into step beside him, their movements synchronized, while the rest of the team scrambled to keep up. As they crested the ridge, they saw the shuttle had made a rough landing in a clearing. The hatch opened, and familiar figures emerged. Zara and Vex, along with a team of human crew members. The two Prilorians stumbled as they exited the shuttle, their markings pulsing erratically as they absorbed the intense energies saturating the air. Brian, Xena, and Lyra rushed to help their companions, their own bodies resonating with the planet's strange power. As their hands touched, a spark of energy passed between them, and suddenly the telepathic link that had formed during their intimate encounter expanded, encompassing Zara and Vex as well. The five of them stood frozen, overwhelmed by the flood of shared sensations and emotions. In that moment, they understood that their connection was more than just a side effect of the alien technology. It was a key to understanding the planet's transformation and possibly to controlling the ancient systems that had awakened. As the human crew members from both teams gathered around them, looking on in confusion and concern, the linked Prilorians and Brian turned as one to face the crystal forest. The structures pulsed in harmony with their shared heartbeat, a visual representation of the profound connection they now shared. They realized that their journey of discovery had only just begun. The alien world held secrets that could reshape their understanding of the universe, and their newfound bond might be the only way to unlock them. With the Nebula Voyager trapped in orbit and two teams now stranded on the rapidly changing planet, they knew that the choices they made in the coming hours would determine not only their own fates, but potentially the future of human-Prilorian relations. The crystal structures seemed to lean towards them, as if awaiting their next move. In the distance, the ancient ruins stirred with untapped power, promising answers to questions they had not yet thought to ask. Brian, Xena, Lyra, Zara, and Vex stood at the threshold of a new chapter in their lives, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves, each other, and the very nature of existence itself. As the five linked individuals stood facing the crystal forest, they felt a subtle shift in their connection. The pulsing energy that flowed through them seemed to resonate with the crystalline structures, creating a harmony of vibrations that tingled through their bodies. Brian, his military instincts kicking in, was the first to act. He reached out tentatively towards the nearest crystal, his fingers trembling slightly as they neared the glowing surface. To his surprise, the crystal responded to his touch, bending and reshaping itself beneath his hand. "Incredible," Lyra breathed, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial shock. She moved closer to Brian, placing her hand next to his. Together they found they could direct the crystal's growth, forming a smooth arch that stretched towards the sky. Xena, Zara, and Vex quickly joined them, their Prilorian physiology allowing them to intuitively grasp the mechanics of this new ability. As the five worked in unison, their telepathic link strengthened, allowing them to communicate without words and coordinate their efforts effortlessly. "We need to get the others to safety," Brian thought, the idea flowing seamlessly to his companions. They nodded in agreement, turning their attention to the human crew members who stood watching in awe. With newfound purpose, the linked group began to manipulate the crystal forest, creating a clear path through the otherwise impenetrable maze of structures. As they worked, they discovered they could influence not just the shape of the crystals, but also their properties. They created smooth, solid walkways and protective barriers, ensuring the safety of their human companions. Alex, the young technician, approached cautiously. "How are you doing this?" he asked, his voice a mix of fear and wonder. Lyra turned to him, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "It's hard to explain," she said softly. "We can feel the energy of this place, and somehow we can shape it to our will." As the group guided the human crew members through the transformed landscape, they became aware of a growing urgency. The planet itself seemed to be awakening, responding to their presence and their manipulation of its energies. They reached the crash site of the shuttle, where the rest of the rescue team waited. Zara and Vex, now fully integrated into the telepathic link, moved forward to greet their fellow Prilorians. "We need to set up a base camp," Brian announced, addressing both the linked group and the human crew members. "This place is changing rapidly, and we need to understand what's happening." As the teams worked to establish a larger camp, the five Prilorians and Brian found themselves drawn to each other with an intensity that was both exhilarating and frightening. The planet's energy seemed to amplify their attraction, creating a charged atmosphere that crackled with potential. In the privacy of a hastily erected tent, Brian found himself alone with Xena. Their eyes met, and without a word, they came together in a passionate embrace. As their bodies intertwined, they felt their connection deepen, unlocking new levels of perception and control over the alien technology. Similar scenes played out across the camp as various combinations of the group explored their growing bond. Each encounter strengthened their link and expanded their abilities, allowing them to manipulate the crystalline structures with increasing precision and power. As night fell, the newly bonded group gathered to discuss their discoveries. Lyra, her scientific mind racing with possibilities, suggested they explore the ruins more thoroughly. "I think there's more to this place than we've seen," she said, her markings pulsing with excitement. "These crystals, this energy, it all has to come from somewhere." Guided by their enhanced senses, the group made their way to the ancient ruins. As they approached, hidden doors slid open, responding to their presence. Inside, they found vast chambers filled with advanced technology, much of it still operational after countless millennia. In the center of the complex, they discovered a room filled with databanks. As they interfaced with the alien computers, information flooded their minds. They learned of the Synergists, an ancient race that had mastered the art of harnessing emotional and physical connections to reshape worlds. "They were terraformers," Vex said in awe, her young face illuminated by the glow of the alien screens. "They could create entire ecosystems through the power of their bonds." As they delved deeper into the Synergist knowledge, they realized the true nature of what they had set in motion. Their intimate encounters had jump-started the planet's dormant terraforming process, but the system was unstable. "We need to complete the bond," Xena said, her voice filled with grit. "All of us, together. It's the only way to stabilize the planet and prevent a catastrophic release of energy." The group exchanged nervous glances, aware of the immense implications of what they were considering. Before they could discuss further, a crackling sound filled the air. A holographic image appeared, showing Captain Thorne on the bridge of the Nebula Voyager. "Can you hear me?" Thorne's voice came through, distorted but understandable. "We've managed to partially overcome the interference. What's your status?" Brian stepped forward, quickly summarizing their discoveries and the situation they faced. Thorne listened intently, his face grave. "This is beyond anything we've encountered before," the captain said. "The potential benefits and risks are enormous. We're preparing for a more extensive research mission, but in the meantime, you need to stabilize that planet." As the communication faded, the group turned to face each other. They knew what they had to do, but the enormity of the task before them was daunting. The fate of the planet, and possibly much more, rested in their hands. Together, they made their way to the central chamber of the ruins, where a massive crystal pulsed with impossibly strong power. As they formed a circle around it, each member connecting physically and mentally with the others, they knew they were about to embark on a journey that would change them forever. The chamber came alive with light as they began the bonding process, waves of pleasure and heightened awareness flowing through their joined bodies and minds. As their consciousnesses merged, they felt the planet responding, its transformation accelerating at an astonishing rate. But even as they reveled in their newfound unity, they sensed a growing danger. The energy they had awakened was building to a critical point, threatening to overwhelm them and the fragile ecosystem they were creating. They stood on the precipice of a monumental decision, one that would determine not only their own fates, but the future of this reborn world. As the energy surged through their intertwined bodies and minds, the team felt the planet's transformation accelerating to a dangerous crescendo. The crystal chamber pulsed with blinding light, threatening to overwhelm them completely. In that moment of crisis, Lyra's scientific intuition kicked in. She focused her thoughts, projecting them to the others through their telepathic link. "We need to modulate the connection," she urged. "Not sever it, not maintain it fully, but find a balance." The others latched onto her idea, instinctively understanding its potential. Together, they concentrated on adjusting the flow of energy between them and the planet's core. It was like tuning a complex instrument, each of them contributing to find the perfect harmony. Slowly, the chaotic surge of power began to stabilize. The blinding light dimmed to a steady, manageable glow. Brian felt the overwhelming pressure in his mind recede, replaced by a controlled, almost comfortable hum of energy. Xena gasped as she realized what they had accomplished. "We can turn it on and off at will," she said, her voice filled with wonder. She demonstrated by briefly intensifying her connection to the others, then pulling back. Vex, the youngest of the group, giggled with excitement. "It's like having a light switch for our bond." As they experimented with their newfound control, the team noticed the chamber around them changing. The aggressive growth of crystal structures slowed, and patches of organic matter began to appear between the gleaming formations. It was as if the planet itself was finding a balance between the alien technology and natural life. Brian flexed his hand, noticing an unfamiliar strength in his muscles. He picked up a piece of fallen crystal that would have been too heavy for him before, lifting it with ease. "Something's different," he muttered. Lyra nodded, her eyes wide with fascination. "Our physiologies are changing," she observed. "The human-Prilorian bond must be altering our genetic makeup on a fundamental level." Zara, who had been quiet until now, suddenly perked up. "I can hear something," she said, tilting her head. "It's faint, but it's coming from deeper in the ruins." The group exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. They made their way through winding corridors of crystal and stone, guided by Zara's enhanced hearing. As they descended into the heart of the ancient complex, they came upon a hidden door that slid open at their approach. Inside, they found a vast laboratory filled with advanced technology beyond even Prilorian understanding. But what caught their attention were the rows of stasis pods lining the walls, each containing a humanoid figure. "Synergists," Xena breathed, approaching one of the pods. "They're alive!" Before they could discuss this monumental discovery, a familiar voice crackled through their communication devices. It was Captain Thorn, his image flickering to life in a holographic display. "Team, report your status," he demanded, his face etched with concern. "We've detected massive energy fluctuations from the planet's surface." Brian quickly briefed the captain on their situation, explaining their newfound abilities and the discovery of the Synergist laboratory. Thorn listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "This changes everything," Thorn said gravely. "I've received orders from both Earth and Prilorian high commands. We're initiating a full quarantine of the planet effective immediately. No one in, no one out without express authorization." The team exchanged uneasy glances. They understood the necessity of the quarantine, but it drove home the magnitude of their discovery. "Captain," Lyra interjected, "I believe Dr. Alara should be allowed to study the physiological changes we've undergone. The medical implications could be groundbreaking." Thorn nodded. "Agreed. I'll make the necessary arrangements. In the meantime, I need you to secure that laboratory. We can't risk any unauthorized awakening of those synergists." As the communication ended, the team turned their attention back to the stasis pods. They began to debate the pros and cons of reviving the ancient aliens, weighing their potential knowledge against the risks they might pose. Their discussion was cut short by a sudden alarm from one of the pods. Energy readings spiked, and the team watched in a mix of anticipation and apprehension as one of the synergists showed signs of emerging from stasis. Brian's military training kicked in. "We need to make a decision fast," he said, his voice tense. "Do we let this happen, or do we try to stop it?" As the team deliberated, the pod's systems continued their awakening sequence. They knew that whatever choice they made in the next few moments would shape not only their future, but potentially that of two civilizations and a reborn world. The hum of energy intensified, and the first cracks appeared on the surface of the stasis pod. Time was running out, and the human Prilorian team stood on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. Everything. The team exchanged a final glance, their bond humming with tension and anticipation. In that moment, Brian made a split-second decision. "We're going to control this awakening," he said, his voice firm with commitment. "Everyone, focus on channeling the energy. We'll create a stable environment for the synergist to emerge." The group immediately sprung into action, their movements fluid and synchronized. They formed a circle around the active stasis pod, joining hands to strengthen their connection. As one, they reached out with their minds, tapping into the planet's energy flow. Xena's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she manipulated the crystalline structures around them, forming a protective barrier. Lyra and Vex worked in tandem, their minds racing to modulate the energy levels within the pod itself. Zara and Brian focused on maintaining the stability of their immediate surroundings, preventing any sudden surges that might disrupt the delicate process. The pod's surface began to crack and splinter, a soft blue light spilling out from within. As the opening widened, a figure emerged, tall, lithe, and utterly alien. Its skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and multiple limbs unfolded gracefully as it stepped out of the stasis chamber. The being's eyes, large and multifaceted, blinked rapidly as they adjusted to the light. It turned its gaze upon the human Prilorian group, head tilting in a gesture of curiosity. A voice, not heard but felt within their minds, resonated through the team's collective consciousness. "I am Zix. You have awakened me from the long sleep. How unexpected." Brian stepped forward, acting as the group's spokesperson. "We are a joint team from Earth and Prylos. We discovered this planet and accidentally activated its systems. We've formed a bond that allows us to interact with your technology." Zix's eyes widened, an expression of surprise and intrigue crossing its alien features. "Fascinating. You have adapted our synergy protocols in ways we never anticipated. Your bond, it is both familiar and new." Before they could delve deeper into conversation, a crackle of static filled the air. Captain Thorne's holographic image materialized, his face etched with concern and curiosity. "Team, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations. What's happening down there?" Thorne's gaze fell upon Zix and his eyes widened. "Is that—" "Captain," Brian interjected, "we've made first contact with one of the synergists. This is Zix. The situation is under control, but we need to move quickly. More pods are showing signs of activation." Thorne nodded, his military training kicking in. "Understood. I'm dispatching a team of scientists and diplomats immediately. We need to secure this site and establish proper first contact protocols." As if on cue, another voice joined the conversation, this one smooth and melodious, speaking in the Prilorian language. A new holographic image appeared, showing the bridge of a Prilorian vessel. "This is Commander Ilara of the Prilorian ship Starweaver," the newcomer announced. "We've arrived in response to the distress call. What is the situation?" Brian and his team found themselves at the center of a rapidly escalating diplomatic scenario. As Thorne and Ilara began to debate jurisdiction and protocol, more stasis pods hummed to life around them. Zix observed the unfolding chaos with an air of bemused attachment. "Your species seem excitable," the synergist commented telepathically to the team. Lyra stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding the tension of the moment. "Zix, we need your help. Can you assist us in safely awakening your people?" The alien nodded, its iridescent skin rippling with the movement. "Indeed, your adaptations to our technology are impressive, but there is much you have yet to learn. Together we can guide my brethren into this new era." As Zix began to instruct them on the intricacies of synergist revival protocols, the chamber around them started to change. The crystalline structures shifted and flowed, forming elegant spires and arches. Patches of vibrant plant life sprouted between the technological marvels, creating a harmonious blend of nature and machine. Brian felt a tingling sensation throughout his body, a surge of strength flowing through his muscles. He glanced at his Prilorian companions and saw that they too were undergoing subtle physical changes. Their markings glowed brighter, and their movements became more fluid, almost ethereal. "We're evolving," Xena whispered, flexing her fingers and watching as small arcs of energy dance between them. The bond, the planet, the synergist technology, it's all changing us. As more synergists emerged from stasis, the team found themselves acting as intermediaries, bridging the gap between the ancient aliens and the representatives from Earth and Prylos. They relayed information, translated concepts, and helped maintain calm as the enormity of the situation became clear to all involved. Zix, observing the increasing tension between the human and Prilorian factions, approached Brian and his team. "Your worlds vie for control of this place and its gifts," the synergist stated, its mental voice tinged with concern. "Such conflict could lead to destruction, Perhaps there is another way. The alien's multiple limbs moved in a complex pattern, and a holographic display sprang to life in the center of the chamber. It showed a network of planets, each one a vibrant blend of crystalline structures and organic life. We have the power to create not one world but many, Zix explained. A network of planets, each a collaborative effort between your species and ours. This would distribute our knowledge and resources, fostering cooperation rather than competition. Brian and his Prelorian companions exchanged glances, their bond humming with excitement and trepidation. They realized that they stood at a pivotal moment in history, poised to shape the future of 3 species and countless worlds. We need to present this proposal to our leaders, Brian said, his voice filled with drive. But first, we need to understand exactly what we've become. Whatever changes we're going through, they've made us uniquely suited to be a part of this. As they prepared to face the arriving diplomats and scientists, the team knew that the challenges ahead would test not only their newfound abilities, but also their bond with each other. The fate of interstellar relations hung in the balance, and they were the key to ensuring a peaceful and prosperous future for all. All species involved. As the team prepared to face the arriving diplomats and scientists, a sudden alarm blared through the chamber. Captain Thorne's holographic image flickered back to life, his face etched with concern. "We've got a situation," he announced, his voice tense. "The Nebula Voyager's sensors have detected an incoming fleet of unknown origin. They're approaching fast." Brian's enhanced senses immediately kicked into high gear. He felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, connecting him more deeply to the planet's systems. Without a word, he and his Prylorian companions linked hands, their minds merging with the Synergist technology. Zix observed with fascination as the human Prylorian team's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "Remarkable," the Synergist commented. "You've achieved a level of integration I've never seen before." Through their connection to the planet, Brian and his team scanned the approaching vessels. Information flooded their shared consciousness, revealing the nature of the new threat. "Captain," Brian reported, his voice resonating with newfound authority, "the fleet belongs to a species called the Vorath. They've detected the energy surge from the planet's transformation and are coming to investigate." Lyra's eyes widened as she processed the data. "Their intentions are not peaceful," she added. "They seek to claim this technology for themselves." Captain Thorne's expression hardened. "Understood. I'm putting the Nebula Voyager on high alert. What's your status down there?" Brian exchanged glances with his team, a plan already forming in their collective mind. "We're going to activate the planet's defenses," he said. "There's a network of dormant systems we can bring online." Without waiting for a response, the team sprang into action. Their movements were fluid and synchronized, each member instinctively knowing their role. Xena and Vex focused on manipulating the crystalline structures, causing them to shift and grow into a massive planet-wide shield. Lyra and Zara tapped into hidden power conduits, channeling energy to long-dormant defense platforms buried beneath the surface. As they worked, Brian reached out telepathically to the Earth and Prylorian representatives who had just arrived on the planet. "We have an imminent threat," he projected into their minds. "We need to form a united front." The diplomats, initially startled by the mental intrusion, quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. Brian sensed their agreement, followed by a flurry of activity as they began coordinating their efforts. Zix and the other awakened synergists gathered around the team, offering their assistance. "The Vorath are an old enemy of our people," Zix explained, its mental voice tinged with concern. "They are known for their aggressive expansion and theft of advanced technology. We cannot allow our knowledge to fall into their hands." As the Vorath fleet entered the system, the transformed planet bristled with newfound defenses. Crystalline spires hummed with energy, projecting a shimmering barrier into the upper atmosphere. Hidden weapon platforms emerged from the ground, their ancient systems whirring to life after millennia of dormancy. In orbit, the Nebula Voyager and the Prylorian ship Starweaver took up defensive positions, their crews on high alert. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through the communication systems. "Incoming transmission from the Vorath fleet." A harsh, guttural voice filled the chamber. Attention, inhabitants of the anomalous planet. We claim this world and all its technology in the name of the Vorath Imperium. Surrender now or face annihilation. Brian stepped forward, drawing on his enhanced abilities. He projected his thoughts outward, establishing a telepathic link with the Vorath leader. This is Brian Chen of Earth, speaking on behalf of a united coalition of Earth, Prylos, and the Synergists. We have no quarrel with you, but we will defend this planet and its inhabitants. I urge you to withdraw and seek peaceful negotiation. The response was immediate and aggressive. Your primitive species have no right to such power. Prepare to be conquered. The Vorath fleet surged forward, energy weapons charging. Brian's team reacted instantly, their minds melded with the planet's defenses. Massive beams of crystalline energy erupted from the surface, slicing through space towards the incoming ships. The battle erupted in earnest. Vorath vessels unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, testing the planet's shields. The Nebula Voyager and Starweaver engaged the outer edges of the fleet, their advanced technology holding its own against the numerically superior force. On the surface, Brian and his companions found their connection to the planet deepening even further. Their bodies began to glow with an inner light, their forms becoming almost translucent as they merged more completely with the Synergist technology. We're changing, Xena gasped, watching as energy crackled between her fingers. Our bodies are adapting to channel more power. Zix observed with a mix of awe and concern. Your transformation is unprecedented. You've become living conduits for our world's energy. As the space battle raged above, Brian's enhanced senses detected a hidden system deep within the planet's core. His mind raced as he deciphered its purpose. There's a weapon, he announced to the team. Something that could disable the entire Vorath fleet without destroying it. Lyra's eyes widened as she accessed the same information. But activating it requires a direct connection to the planet's core. We'd have to physically interface with the system. And risk permanently merging with the technology, Vex added, his voice grave. The team exchanged glances, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. The battle above intensified, with reports of damage to both Earth and Prylorian ships filtering through their communications. We need to move fast, Brian said, his commitment evident in his voice. Whatever we decide, we need to do it now. As one, the human Prylorian team turned towards the heart of the ancient complex. Their bodies shimmered with awe-inspiring energy, each step leaving a trail of luminescent footprints. They began their descent into the planet's depths, racing against time as the fate of multiple worlds hung in the balance. The crystalline corridors seemed to respond to their presence, shifting and opening to guide them towards their destination. Behind them, Zix and the other Synergists watched with a mixture of hope and trepidation, aware that the next few moments would shape the course of history for all their species. As they approached the planet's core, the team could feel the pull of the ancient technology growing stronger. The choice before them loomed large: risk everything by fully connecting with the planet's systems, or continue the conventional battle with potentially devastating consequences. With each step, the hum of power grew louder, urging them towards a decision that would alter the course of their lives and the future of interstellar relations forever. The hum of power grew to a deafening roar as Brian and his companions reached the heart of the ancient complex. The crystalline corridors gave way to a vast, cavernous chamber that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. At its center stood an enormous obelisk-like structure, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the ethereal light. "This is it," Brian breathed, his voice barely audible over the thrumming energy. "The weapon system's core." The team formed a circle around the obelisk, their bodies now glowing with bioluminescent patterns that synchronized with the pulsing energy of the room. As they prepared to interface with the technology, the familiar forms of Zix and two other Synergists materialized beside them. "We offer our assistance," Zix communicated telepathically. "The activation process is complex and potentially dangerous. Allow us to guide you." Brian nodded, his eyes meeting those of his Prylorian companions. Without a word, they joined hands, forming a living circuit around the obelisk. The moment their circle closed, a surge of energy coursed through them, threatening to overwhelm their senses. Zix's mental voice cut through the chaos. Focus your minds. Allow the energy to flow through you, but do not let it consume you. Following the synergist's guidance, the team began to merge with the obelisk. Their consciousness expanded, connecting them to every facet of the planet's defense network. Brian gasped as he felt the crystalline structures on the surface responding to his thoughts, forming new defensive formations and energy weapons. In orbit, the battle raged on. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through the communication systems. We've detected a massive energy surge from the planet. All Allied ships fall back immediately. As the Nebula Voyager and Prilorian vessels retreated, Brian and his team reached the critical moment. Their bodies had begun to crystallize, slowly fusing with the obelisk and surrounding structures. With a collective effort, they activated the Synergist weapon. A wave of blinding energy pulsed outward from the planet, engulfing the Vorath fleet in seconds. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The once menacing warships now drifted powerless in space, their systems completely disabled. But the victory came at a cost. As the energy wave dissipated, Brian felt his body becoming one with the obelisk. Panic surged through him as he realized they were being absorbed by the ancient technology. "Zix," he called out mentally, "we can't separate ourselves." The synergists sprang into action, their multiple limbs moving in complex patterns as they initiated an emergency protocol. "Hold on," Zix urged. "We're going to sever the connection." As the synergists worked to free them, a shared vision overwhelmed the team. They saw a future of unparalleled cooperation and advancement. Humans, Prilorians, and synergists working side by side, exploring the cosmos and defending against threats like the Vorath. The image was so vivid, so tantalizing, that for a moment they forgot their dire situation. With a jolt, the vision vanished. Brian found himself lying on the chamber floor, his body aching but blessedly solid. Around him, his Prilorian companions stirred, each looking as dazed and disoriented as he felt. What happened?" Xena asked, her voice hoarse. Zix approached, its crystalline form shimmering with concern. "We managed to separate you from the systems, but not without consequence. You have been changed by this experience." Brian flexed his fingers, feeling a residual connection to the planet's technology. The bond between him and his companions felt stronger than ever, a mental link that pulsed with shared emotions and thoughts. "We need to get back to the surface," Lyra said, struggling to her feet. "The Vorath fleet has been neutralized," Vex finished, the information flowing through their shared consciousness. As they made their way back through the shifting corridors, Brian's mind raced. They had saved the planet, possibly the entire sector, but at what cost? And what would happen now? The answer awaited them on the surface. As they emerged from the complex, they found a scene of controlled chaos. Shuttles from Earth and Priloria were landing, disgorging diplomats and scientists eager to survey the transformed world. Captain Thorne approached, his face a mix of relief and apprehension. "Brian, thank God you're all right. We've got a situation up here. The Vorath ships are disabled, but we need to secure them before they can restore power." Brian nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "We'll help coordinate the efforts from down here. But first, we need to speak with the representatives. There's a lot to discuss." As the team moved to address the gathering crowd of humans and Prilorians, Brian felt a surge of mixed emotions. The intimacy of their shared experience had deepened their bonds in ways he was only beginning to understand. He found himself acutely aware of Xena's presence beside him, of Zara's quiet strength, Lyra's quick mind, and Vex's unwavering support. The Prilorians, too, seemed to be grappling with new feelings. Their usual cultural reservations appeared to have melted away, replaced by a comfort and closeness that was palpable. As they prepared to address the assembled leaders, Brian took a deep breath. The fate of 3 species and countless worlds hung on what they would say next. With a shared glance at his companions, he stepped forward, ready to present their vision of a collaborative future. The negotiations would be complex, the challenges immense. But as he felt the steady presence of his team beside him and the hum of the planet beneath his feet, Brian knew they were ready to face whatever came next. As Brian stepped forward to address the assembled leaders, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The vibration intensified, causing the gathered crowd to stumble and murmur in confusion. Brian's enhanced senses flared to life, his connection to the planet's systems flooding his mind with information. "Everyone, remain calm," he called out, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We're detecting a surge in the planet's energy field." Xena moved closer to Brian, her eyes wide with concern. "It's not just a surge, the entire planet is changing." Through their shared mental link, the team quickly grasped the situation. The recent events had triggered a final phase of planetary transformation, one that could reshape the entire world if left unchecked. Captain Thorne pushed through the crowd, his face etched with worry. "Chen, what's happening? Our sensors are going haywire." Brian turned to address the captain and the assembled leaders. "The planet is entering a new phase of evolution. We need to act quickly to stabilize it and guide the transformation." As if to underscore his words, a massive crystalline spire erupted from the ground nearby, its surface shimmering with pulsing energy. The crowd gasped in awe and fear. "Listen carefully," Brian continued, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We have an unprecedented opportunity here. This planet, with its synergist technology, offers us a chance to create something truly remarkable." He paused, making eye contact with the human and Prilorian representatives. "I propose we establish a shared governance system for this world with equal representation from humans, Prilorians, and synergists." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A Prilorian diplomat stepped forward, her antennae twitching with interest. "And what of the synergist technology? Surely that must be considered in any agreement." Zix glided forward, its crystalline form catching the light. "We synergists offer our technology freely, to be shared among all. Our only condition is that it be used for peaceful exploration and defense." The ground shook again and more crystalline structures began to rise in the distance. Brian and his team exchanged glances, knowing they needed to act quickly. "We don't have much time," Lyra said, her voice urgent. "We need to guide this transformation before it spirals out of control." Brian nodded, turning back to the crowd. "We need your trust and cooperation. My team and I can interface with the planet's systems to shape this change, but we need your support to make this work." As the negotiations began in earnest, Brian and his Prilorian companions spread out across the area. Using their newfound abilities, they reached out to the planet's energy field, channeling and directing its flow. Massive crystalline structures continued to rise, but now they formed with purpose and design. The team worked in perfect harmony, their minds linked as they shaped the emerging landscape. Towering spires and graceful arches blended seamlessly with the alien vegetation, creating a breathtaking fusion of technology and nature. Hours passed as they worked, pausing only briefly to contribute to the ongoing negotiations. As the first day drew to a close, a preliminary agreement was reached. The planet would indeed be governed jointly, with Brian and his team appointed as the first ruling council. As the twin moons rose in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the transformed landscape, Brian found a moment of quiet with his Prilorian companions. They stood together on a newly formed crystalline balcony, overlooking the breathtaking cityscape they had helped create. "It's beautiful," Xena whispered, her hand finding Brian's. Zara nodded, her eyes reflecting the shimmering lights below. "We've created something truly unique here." The five of them stood in comfortable silence, their bodies glowing softly with residual energy from their efforts. The intimacy of their shared experience hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Finally, Vex broke the silence. "We should discuss us, what we've become to each other." Brian felt a flutter of nervous excitement in his stomach. He'd been acutely aware of the growing attraction between them, but hadn't dared to hope it was reciprocated. "I've never felt a connection like this," Lyra admitted, her voice soft. "It's as if we're one being, in 5 bodies." They turned to face each other, forming a close circle. Brian's heart raced as he looked at each of his companions in turn, seeing his own emotions reflected in their eyes. "I love you," he said simply, the words encompassing all 4 of them. "All of you." The Prilorians didn't hesitate. They moved as one, enveloping Brian in a group embrace. Their bodies pressed close, a tangle of human and alien limbs, that felt perfectly natural. "We love you too," Xena murmured, her lips brushing against Brian's cheek. As they held each other under the alien moons, Brian knew that their journey was not nearly finished. The real work of building this new world was just beginning. But with his newfound family by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.